Morning, Washington. Good morning to our good evening to our audience in the Caspian region. Today we are hosting a very important event, completion of the Southern Gas Corridor, an American diplomatic success, but what comes to next. My name is Afkan Nifty. I'm the Executive Director of the Caspian Policy Center. Uh, Obviously, we have a very impressive line of speakers. I would like to welcome all the ambassadors, Ambassador Sleimanov, Ambassador of Albania, Florta Faber, Ambassador of Georgia, David Barkaza, and Deputy Chief of Mission, Ambassador of Turkey to the United States. And I'd like to also welcome Francis Fannin, who was the Assistant Secretary for Energy Resources at the U.S. Department of State. And I'd like to welcome all other speakers, including Ambassador Morningstar, Elshad Nasirov from Baku, from SOCAR, and also Bob Sher from BP. This is a very interesting event after the big success for the region and also the international partners of the region. While boosting the prosperity and independence and well-being of the countries and the overall energy security of Europe, the Southern Gas Corridor's completion comes at a very interesting time in change in the energy markets and increased focus on addressing climate change. Yet, concerns about Russia's reliability as a natural gas supplier and its politicization of gas exports and the need for natural gas in Europe remain, just as countries in the Caspian Basin continue to have significant gas deposits. I think this was a long journey for the region and the partners of the region to build the Southern Gas Corridor. This is an important achievement. With this event, we want to highlight this achievement and see what are the prospects for the energy markets and also the Caspian prospects. Caspian Policy Center is proud to present this event to you, and we will continue similar events, but it's good to start this event into 2021 with some good positive news. Yeah, we all remember 2020 wasn't so great with the pandemic and for the global markets as well. But I hope with this positive tone, we will continue to have positive developments in the region and across the globe. With this, I'd like to again welcome all our audience and thanks for tuning for this event. We have seen a lot of registrations for this event, and it made us think that maybe perhaps everybody was looking for such an event. I'd like to turn to our board member, Ambassador Bob Sikuda, to take over and start the discussion. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Afkan. Thank you. And indeed, I think, as you said, 2020 was a year that for many of us had very little to recommend it. But one of the positive developments of the last year, an important positive development, was indeed the completion and the beginning of commercial operations of the whole of the Southern Gas Corridor. The completion of this $40 billion project with its launch of the 878-kilometer Trans-Adriatic Pipeline stretching from Turkey across Greece and Albania to Italy, is a necessary contribution to European and thus global energy security. The realization of this $40 billion project required diplomatic creativity, international cooperation, and technical and other expertise from leading energy companies. It's certainly a moment for congratulations and to appreciate the successful results of years of hard work by government leaders and officials, diplomats, corporate executives, experts and workers, and countless others who helped make this possible. But it's also a moment to be looking ahead. And so I'm really glad to sort of have this group together to first hear from ambassadors in the countries directly involved in the project. And then former Assistant Secretary Frank Fannin, who sort of brought this home on the US government side. And then from three people who had critical roles in making this happen. So with that, I'd like to open the floor now to the ambassadors, asking them to kind of keep the remarks about 5 minutes. One other housekeeping message I probably should make is that we will be taking questions in the Q&A function, so please put those in and we will get to them later on. But we'll go through the remarks first and then sort of do Q&A sort of as a discussion at the end. So if I may turn the floor over now to Ambassador Sleimanov.
Good morning, Ambassador Sikuda. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Of course, it's great to see my colleagues, the ambassadors, your excellencies, our good friend Sinan Bey from the Turkish Embassy. Actually, thank you, CPC, for allowing me finally to see Mr. Nasirov and his team in Baku directly face to face. We usually speak on the phone. It's good to see you. And of course, it's always a pleasure to see Dick Morningstar. My special thanks, of course, goes to Mr. Fannin because he continued during his tenure at the State Department to follow the bipartisan line of supporting the Southern Gas Corridor, energy diversification in Europe, and development of the Caspian energy resources. Thank you, Mr. Fannin, and for your contribution. And I look forward to keep working with you on these important issues. I don't want to take much of your time because the people on the panel are much better informed and are much better speakers, and they have the wealth of experience I don't have to speak on this subject. I just want to touch on a couple of issues. As Ambassador Sekuta pointed out, this is the completion of a very important part of this project. I mean, the project is basically initial stage is completed. I'm very happy to say that though it was initially budgeted at $45 billion, it came down to 40, and thanks to great efforts and efficiency of the participants of the project, it actually came significantly under the budget. I think Mr. Nasirov knows the exact numbers, but I think we're talking about 30 plus billion dollars. That is significant. So it's 1/3, about 30% less than envisioned initially. I think that shows how well we could all work together if we do it. I think the project like the Southern Gas Corridor has created a new geography in Europe. And I want to thank my colleagues, be it from the Turkish Embassy, the Georgian Embassy, the Embassy of Albania, and of course our friends from the embassies of Italy and Greece, that when we work together, it created a new cooperation format. And I think, and I hope we will continue working on this because it showed the indispensable benefit of working together towards a common tangible goal. And the tangible goals are important because that's what made Azerbaijani-Georgian connection so strong. And also what made our outreach towards the Aegean and the Mediterranean region so successful. I think that's where we should focus in general. And that's a good example where the United States policy of supporting a result-oriented, tangible project which benefit every participant and the region as a whole is so important. I think we should also look at the multiplication effect of the Southern Gas Corridor. It's not just delivery of the particular Shah Deniz and Shah Deniz 2 gas to the European markets. We're talking about expanding into the Balkans now. We're talking about IGB, which is very important. It's a Bulgarian extension. And then, of course, there are other countries in the Balkans which are very interested in this. That would be only possible when Southern Gas Corridor is successfully completed. One of the milestones, historic milestones, is a very recent, I think it was January 21st, signing of a MOU on development of the field in the Caspian between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, which is now called Dostluk, the friendship field. For 30 years, if not more, definitely after the breakup of the Soviet Union, that's been a contagious issue between the two countries. The Azerbaijani side and the Turkmen side had long talked about this, we discussed this. Now this issue is resolved, and I think the impulse and incentive for the resolution came as a result of the successful completion of the Southern Gas Corridor. So there is a multiplication effect, not only towards the western side of our region, but also to the east, and that reinforces our connection with Central Asia. It creates new opportunities in transport, in communications, and likewise, it's a bit of a sensitive issue between Ambassador Morningstar and I know everybody else, because he's very concerned that should the Trans-Caspian pipe go, his health would be in danger. I can assure you, at the moment, nobody's talking about this. Don't worry, Ambassador. We're just talking about developing a joint field. That's really, we're not going any farther than that. But I think.
Thank you, Alim.
Yeah. But I think it is important that he will explain later what I meant. But that success by itself is very important. It shows that not only this particular project can be completed successfully, but it could spread the benefit around. To that effect, I think one of the most important events of the 2020, of course, has been the restoration of constitutional control of Azerbaijan over the previously occupied territories, and now restoration of Azerbaijani territorial integrity within the internationally recognized borders by the United Nations and the world community. The reason I'm bringing it up is because there too, we have enormous opportunities to work together. Now, new emerging possibilities of transportation corridors, working together with our neighbors, including Armenia, and incorporation into the region on a positive agenda to make everybody's sovereignty and everybody's development sustainable. So I think we need to look into these opportunities as well. That may not be directly related to the issue of Southern Gas Corridor, but it could also be related in many ways because development of our region comes from this large-scale infrastructure projects. On that note, maybe opposite to this, we should not forget that what happened in July of this year when there was a cross-border attack in the area where all this transportation links are very much concentrated in the Tovuz area of Azerbaijan across the border from Armenia, might have had much wider implications. So our region is very interrelated. We need to understand that. So if you attack an area where the pipelines are going through, where the region's lifelines and bloodlines are come together, what may happen is that the implications may go much further, and the damage could have been much further than just to that region or to Azerbaijan alone. So I want to mention this so people keep that in mind as well, because we have witnessed the potential consequences and ramifications of hostilities, but we also see a great new opportunity for development and future integration. Anyway, at this, I think I should stop and thank everybody else. Thank everybody and wish everybody a great discussion. And I look forward to hearing you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you. Those were good remarks. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Ambassador Floreta Faber from Albania and to hear the views of one of the countries participating in the project and also part of the world that needs more energy. Zonja Ambassador.
Unmute. You can hear me now. Thank you, Ambassador Cekuta, Mr. Fannon, dear distinguished ambassadors, colleagues, honored guests. I am very happy to have been invited and be part of this event today. And it certainly gives me the opportunity to discuss the completion of a crucial energy interconnectivity project like the Southern Gas Corridor. And I would like to also discuss specifically internationally and local dynamics involving the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, which travels through Albania. 2020 was a difficult year for the entire world, and good news were not common, but by the end of it, we all welcomed the great news and felt enthusiastic regarding the commencement of the gas flow from Azerbaijan. The Trans-Adriatic Pipeline has been an ongoing major development in Albania since the signing of Memorandum of Understanding, I believe since May 2004, when the Albanian government in principle agreed to be part of this project. Albania expressed immediate interest and readiness for involvement from the beginning. And I remember I've been working with the Albanian and American companies in Albania for 15 years before I came to this position. And I remember the enthusiasm expressed when Albania could be part of this key initiative that aimed in adding diverse sources of energy supply to the European continent in general, and later to Southeastern European countries in particular. Albania's decision to be part of this project was a clear sign of our understanding that US presence in the Balkans is of necessity. By being part of this project, we were not simply participating in the construction of a pipeline, but also we were part of a process of constructing a strategic energy networks and which would play an active role in providing and supporting energy diversification sources for Europe, our region, and for our country itself. I'm sure everyone who's in this panel and probably the audience have seen the maps of Europe's, how the gas line are like capillaries that cover each other and through the entire countries. And it's pretty much overlapping and no blank spots. But if you zoomed a map of Western Balkans, is distinctly empty and almost white. Albania for the first time become part of a footprint of the gas network, and the US presence and participation of US companies in this project was a guarantee that it was a great project and we could be part of it. Not simply for the gas project, for the potential economically that bring, and we thought in the beginning, hopefully other FDIs will join Albania and the region. Energy security, source diversification, and decarbonization objectives are of crucial importance, and we are glad to contribute to the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline efforts to boost them. An integrated gas energy market and diversification of supply will be indeed great accomplishment, and what is most important during these times of climate change being in the world's greatest challenge, they will introduce a much more environmentally friendly resources. Now that the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline has officially started, I believe it's important to underline the main elements of the impact of this project for Albania as a unique investment of its kind. As we are talking what's going to be next, the construction of the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline has generated high volume of work for Albanian companies because they were contracted and subcontracted from foreign companies that were in the country, and which brought a substantial increase in the number of jobs available for individuals. As we expected, the project has increased the number of investments in the country, other companies coming in and building up the economy and contributing to strengthening of local businesses. The Trans-Adriatic Pipeline now constitutes the backbone of the infrastructure for the gasification of Albania and promotes energy security and diversification of energy resources for the country itself. Going forward, natural gas will be considered a high potential source of energy in the country, while local companies develop the necessary skills and expertise to project and construct national gas infrastructure that will greatly contribute to the implementation of what we call the Albanian Gas Master Plan. And I can take the advantage now, hopefully some US companies are in the audience and they can look at Albania for many opportunities in cooperation of implementation, the Albanian Gas Master Plan, so they can be involved in future business projects. The Gas Master Plan involves and holds strategic goals regarding the gasification, not only Albania, but also the construction of another 2 interconnections like the Ionian Adriatic Pipeline and the Albanian Kosovo Pipeline. Through the development of future of those 2 projects, Albania will take huge steps forwards toward transition, not simply transition of the gas lines, but also the consumption, and hopefully will have the distribution also in countries like Montenegro, Bosnia, and partially Croatia. We believe that those projects are BRIC projects, will bring more companies, stability, security. We become part of the networks and increase cooperation between our countries in the region and these countries and Europe. And I would like to close my remarks here, trying to keep it in time. And last but not least, I would like to thank first of all British Petroleum, which considered the cooperation with Albania as a very successful and exemplary, to state-owned company in Azerbaijan for being a key piece in bringing the projects to life. I would like to thank Caspian Policy Center for organizing this event, and specifically my special friend and colleague, Ambassador Sulejmanov, for working hard and working together in supporting this project to move forward and to become a reality. Through the last years, We have been talking and communicating a lot together, but talking about this project and how we can move that forward has been part of our main topics. So I'm happy we are all together in this panel today. Looking forward to the discussions.
Sonia Ambassador Shum, thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. That was great remarks. Appreciate that. If I can turn the floor over now to Ambassador David Barkaza, Ambassador of Georgia, please. Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, dear friends, colleagues, ambassadors. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and good afternoon, good evening to those following from Europe. It's a very important day. I believe the completion of the South Gas Corridor is a milestone for the very important milestone for our region, for the Europe, for US, and generally transatlantic energy security and security in general. So congratulations to CPC for setting up this discussion, very timely and very important. Let me give you some remarks from Georgia's perspective. As through years we have been considering the collaboration with our neighbors as the only viable way to ensuring security, stability, and sustainable development of our region, of our country. So in this very complex geopolitical environment that we live in, creating the setting which where cooperation can flourish and countries can benefit is of huge importance. So we greatly value and appreciate the strategic partnership that we have with Turkey, with Azerbaijan, and our trilateral relations are, of course, very broad and wide-ranging and has achieved, I think, highest levels over the past years. This trilateral cooperation and process between Georgia, Turkey, and Azerbaijan is a mechanism and a cooperation initiative with very important strategic dimensions. This format could be regarded as a comprehensive project towards regional integration through political, economic, commercial, trade, cultural, and of course energy cooperation. And it is firmly based on our mutual respect, on common interests and joint values. Due to the strategic location of our countries and the role of connecting link between Europe and Asia, obviously the areas such as transport, energy are driving force of these relations, and we have already achieved and gained a substantial progress in this regard. So as I said, the regional connectivity in this sense plays a crucial role for the economic prosperity. And these corridors of energy, of transport developed over the last decades ensures a strong economic growth in the region and contributes to the regional security as well. Our existing and ongoing regional projects are clear examples of the strategic cooperation that these three countries enjoy, and that brings resilience and security to the region generally. So therefore we reaffirm a steady determination that to maintain and deepen the interaction with in the Southern Energy Corridor. Azerbaijan has a strong ability to supply increasing energy needs of Europe. Georgia, Turkey has transit capabilities that are creating a very important and unique opportunity to promote these projects at the international level. So it is very important that to enhance the mutual cooperation and facilitate the realization of these projects, to deliver additional resources through our countries to the European market in need. So in that sense, in December last year, after more than 7 years in the making of the Southern Gas Corridor, we have achieved this important milestone for the regional cooperation that has been spanning the 7 nations, that has commenced delivering a vital source of energy to Europe and has been the largest gas project since 2017. So this really highlights also a successful partnership in the region, but also for the Europe's energy security and diversification. I would like to separately emphasize the importance of the US and EU engagement in backing this project. It is also very important to note that the corridor over the past years has been enjoying strong bipartisan support here in the United States from the Congress, from the Senate, with the leadership of the former senators and friends of Georgia and the region of Richard Lugar, and now President Joe Biden, who has led the Senate Foreign Relations Committees. And energy security definitely remains as an important issue in our bilateral agenda, in the agenda of US with the region. So we are looking forward to building the future and further cooperation with the new administration to build on the previous bipartisan, I would say, successes and work closely in the field of energy security. I will stop here, and I will be looking forward to listening to colleagues at this very important panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ambassador. I really appreciate those remarks and sort of pulling these things together. If I could turn the floor over now to Mr. Sinan Atay, the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Turkish Embassy in Washington.
Thank you, Ambassador Sekuda. Dear Mr. Nifty, dear former Assistant Secretary, distinguished ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to thank the Caspian Policy Center for organizing this utmost important and timely conference on the Southern Gas Corridor. It is my distinct honor to address such a distinguished audience of experts here today. If you allow me, I would like to start off by briefly outlining Turkey's energy policies. Turkey is in the neighborhood of about 60% of the proven oil and natural gas reserves, and in its region is one of the biggest markets for natural gas and electricity. In the past 5 years, Turkey's increase in energy demand is the highest among OECD countries. Currently, our import dependency for energy stands at about 74%. Therefore, the safety of our energy supply, including the diversification of energy routes and resources, is of paramount importance. In this context, we are diversifying our supply sources in natural gas as well. We are confident that our recent natural gas discovery in the Black Sea will also strengthen our energy security, as well as that of the rest of Europe. Moreover, Turkey was an early mover in recognizing the potential of LNG and has dramatically increased its LNG import capacity. It stood at a record height of 35% in our total gas imports in the first 10 months of 2020. As a result, the share of Russian gas in our imports fell to 28% as of last October. LNG imports from the US, talking about Turkey-US cooperation on the other hand, stood at 9.5% of our total natural gas imports as of October. From across the Atlantic, the US has become Turkey's 5th biggest gas supplier, with the potential to become the 4th after Russia, our close ally and good friend Azerbaijan, and Algeria. In this framework, we look forward to further increasing our cooperation with the US in the energy field. Energy is one of the many positive aspects in our relations with our longstanding ally, the US. So we would also like to focus in that respect as well. Ladies and gentlemen, not to take much of your time, with its strategic, geographical, and geopolitical position, Turkey has become a reliable, stable, predictable, and transparent energy trade hub between the energy-rich Caspian Basin, Middle East and Central Asia, and the consumer markets in the rest of Europe and beyond. Using this opportunity, I would like to reiterate the excellent cooperation that we enjoy with our close friends Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Albania, not only in the energy field, but also in many other areas. Having personally served, amongst other places, in our embassies in Tbilisi, Gamarjovat ambassador, and in Skopje, as well as in our EU delegation in Brussels, I witnessed firsthand the importance of energy security in the Southern Caucasus, the Balkans, and Europe as a whole. One of the projects that underscore the energy security of these regions and Europe as a whole is certainly the Southern Gas Corridor. With the completion of the corridor, it is safe to say that Turkey's contribution to the energy diversification and supply security of the European Union has been reinforced. Turkey's Trans-Anatolian Natural Gas Pipeline, or in short TANAP, is the backbone of the corridor. Currently at 16 BCM per year capacity, TANAP aims to reach a 31 BCM capacity per year in 2026, and eventually will be the fourth main artery to carry gas to the European Union. Turkey also will contribute further to the EU gas security with the Energy Exchange Istanbul, or in short, EXIST, which will enhance transparency and energy price security in the region, particularly for Eastern and Southeastern Europe, by establishing a gas price setting mechanism in Turkey, in Istanbul. Scheduled to be operational this year, the futures gas market is also of great importance in terms of creating a market where the natural gas we produce can be sold through futures contracts. With its developed infrastructure and futures gas market, Turkey is a step closer towards its goal of becoming a natural gas trading hub. And again, fully aware that I've taken much of your precious time, I would like to conclude my remarks by thanking again the Caspian Policy Center for organizing this event and all the distinguished participants for their invaluable insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Artay. Thank you for those remarks. And I'd like to turn the floor over now to former Assistant Secretary, Mr. Frank Fannin. I think one of the things which I've sort of always appreciated about Frank is he's the first Assistant Secretary of State for Energy of Resource Affairs in the U.S. government, a position which we've long needed, and I know a number of people, including Senator Lugar, long fought to see. So we're very grateful to have him here today. And I'd like him to deliver a few keynote remarks on his perception on where we stand today, what brought us to this point, and where we might be going next. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to former Assistant Secretary Fannin. Frank?
Thank you so much, Ambassador. It's great to be with you and so many other friendly faces and friends. I'm still getting over the former part, I have to say, Bob. I'm still reconciling that. I'm pleased to speak to this group. This is actually my first public remark since concluding my tenure. I had the good fortune to advance energy diplomacy around the world. We worked in that area where energy is not a technical matter, but really is energy as a proxy for foreign policy. The Southern Gas Corridor may be one of the greatest testaments to that concept. Traveling the world and speaking with ministers, captains of industry, civil society, I soon learned that energy is more than just BTUs or barrels. Energy is foundational to development, to security, to the exercise of sovereignty. The Southern Gas Corridor was a path to all three of those. The achievement was built on decades of energy diplomacy across successive US administrations on a bipartisan basis, as has been said. I think someone else has already recognized former Senator, Republican Senator Dick Lugar and then Democratic Senator Joe Biden, now President Biden, when they chaired the Foreign Relations Committee. The United States has worked publicly and through back channels to advance the Southern Gas Corridor with the European counterparts, the European Commission. We understood what was at stake, very much so. and how the Southern Gas Corridor could enhance European energy security, the US energy security, and transatlantic security writ large. Governments here deserve an incredible amount of credit. I'm very pleased to have played a very small part on the backs of many of your roles. But governments, of course, can just, they play an important role, but governments don't build anything. They don't execute. That's the province of the private sector. And I think we need to recognize that. And I saw Bob Schur on there from BP earlier as well. And there's other private sector counterparts to really underscore the critical role that the private sector has played in this remarkable achievement. But reflecting on this achievement, I was just struck really with how audacious the idea really was. And the amount of diplomacy that was required to realize the ambition. You know, I've heard many pitches from when I was in the private sector and in government. And I reflected on that, preparing for thinking about these remarks today. And I said, well, what if I heard a pitch 20 years plus ago about the Southern Gas Corridor? What would I have thought? I was thinking, well, so I'm sitting in my office, someone comes to me and says, so Frank, do I have a deal for you? Let's produce some natural gas in Azerbaijan, build a pipeline costing $40 billion, have nearly a dozen countries involved. Some may not exactly have a history of great cooperation, even more companies than that, some state-owned, some private, multiple credit agencies, no less than 17 commercial banks involved. And let's do this thing. What do you think? It seems crazy. But, you know, and it's even more remarkable after I reflected on my time in government. Big organizations tend to have big bureaucracies. Prior to my recent service, I was an executive at the world's largest diversified resources company. And I thought I was well prepared for the scale of bureaucracy until I got to the State Department. And I was wrong. The bureaucracy is enormous. And now again, multiply that across multiple governments. Yet it was achieved. And you know, it serves as a proof of concept of the realm of the possible. And the corridor, the Southern Gas Corridor, has established in that proof of concept, and I think some of the other ambassadors spoke to some of the other diversification efforts that has been created around this by this recognition of this alignment of the public and the private and what could be achieved in that. You know, again, the number of countries, companies, and projects and financiers spelled a degree of complexity that seems, in retrospect, too challenging, too risky, too expensive, yet it was a success. It was a major achievement to diversification of Europe. I know we're talking here also about what's next, but you can only build on what has already been achieved. And in this regard, the Southern Gas Corridor represents so much. It symbolized that proof of concept. You know, if this can be accomplished, then why can't we provide greater energy diversification in the Balkans? Why not create gas hubs? And as a colleague in Turkey, from Turkey spoke to, Greece is looking as creating connectivity toward it, the IGB with Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and elsewhere. We advanced Croatia's Kirk Island LNG import terminal to create potential optionality to other places and interconnect with the Southern Gas Corridor writ large. Recently, one of my last calls as Assistant Secretary was with Albania's fantastic minister, Belinda Baluku. She's a pragmatic and exceptional professional with vision about a future for Albania and the potential for Albania to offer diversifications to its neighbors. Again, the audacious goal of the Southern Gas Corridor, where we thought this was possible, maybe not, but now it's completely probable, not just possible. Again, after all, the Southern Gas Corridor is a reality. Also, I think it's important to consider the Southern Gas Corridor. I know we all do. Many of colleagues have spoke to this. Where there, you know, an energy project can be more than just a delivery of gas. It can be a pipeline, can be a bridge like in the case of, we consider a bridge from Ukraine to Europe. It can also be a tether, a leash, bringing people back. We can certainly talk about Nord Stream 2 in that context to Germany, holding them back. But I think what's also critically important, and I think Ambassador Solomonov spoke to this, he talked about the multiplier effects. I speak to, in a similar way, how projects like this can have a halo effect, and can provide, by having that degree of cooperation, it can lead to other political dimensions, other trade. It can foster stability because everyone is involved, everyone is bought in, and meaningfully so, and is supporting the idea. The Southern Gas Corridor, I think we're really at the beginning of that halo effect approach. But we've already been seeing how the proof of concept is providing a degree of confidence for other investment projects and diversification goals. The Southern Gas Corridor, and the ambassador from Albania spoke to creating a backbone. She referred to it as a backbone for gas infrastructure. I think that's a fantastic vision to consider it. What I see is it creates that optionality for diversification that is often talked about but rarely realized. It introduces competition where none existed before, and now it actually forces market behavior. And a colleague from Greece, or excuse me, from Turkey, was speaking about new gas market hub and pricing. I think that it's spawning these kind of effects and allowing that private sector concept to go forward. Lastly, I just want to say, you know, just recognize that the discussion around energy transition and Europe's focus on this area, and the gas has a critically important role to play in that. Whenever we see globally, well, first, different countries are starting their transitions from different points of their energy makeup. And whenever I see globally, there is a significant increase in renewables, gas is always that foundation. In this regard, I would argue that the Southern Gas Corridor and the gas that is coming online is wholly consistent with the energy transition goals of Europe. And I would encourage you all to make that case. And that this gas should be supported and integrated in European planning, not perceived as something that's in conflict with it. With that, Ambassador, I'll pause my remarks. I look forward to further discussion. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity to celebrate this milestone, and thank you for all of your longstanding support to achieve it.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you for all the work that you put in over your years in the State Department. As Ambassador Morningstar and I can commiserate, we know what trying to move a bureaucracy can be like. So we appreciate those remarks. If we can turn now to our panel, we have really a phenomenal group here. Sort of three people, all of whom had key roles in making this project actually happen, and in translating the government's views, government's concepts into reality on the ground or under the sea, as the case may be. If we can start, I'd like to first, there were three people on the panel: Ambassador Morningstar, Elshad Nasudov from SOCAR, and Bob Scher from BP. I'd like to sort of start first. Each would sort of speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll take Q's and A's. And some of those have been coming in. Please keep them coming in through the Q&A function. But if I could first recognize Ambassador Richard Morningstar, just in terms of giving a little bit of background on Ambassador Morningstar. In addition to being ambassador to Azerbaijan, he was also U.S. ambassador to the EU. He was special envoy for Eurasian energy under the also under the he was a special envoy for Eurasian energy under Secretary Clinton, and then Under President Clinton, he was Special Advisor to the President and Secretary of State for Caspian Energy Basin Diplomacy. He's also the founding director and chair of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. And he is certainly the godfather of the Southern Gas Corridor. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ambassador Morningstar.
I had to remember to get off mute. Thanks very much, Bob. And it's good to see so many, so many old friends today, both who've spoken on this, also on this panel, and the huge number of attendees who are listening in. And congratulations to everybody who helped to get this incredible project done. I don't want to repeat a lot of what's said. I'll maybe briefly go over some of it and then possibly talk about the future. Going back, Ambassador Suleymanov's point about working together was absolutely key. The companies played an incredibly major role, particularly both BP and SOCAR. And Elshad Nasirov was an absolute hero in his role at SOCAR. And what was, I think, most important is that both BP and SOCAR and others kept their eyes on the ball throughout the whole process. Sure, there were issues, sure, there were negotiations, but both companies recognized that this had to be done. And in spite of difficulties at different times, got it done, whether it was SOCAR and Elshad or, Bob Dudley, former CEO at BP, played a huge direct role when issues had to be decided. That the parties came together and got it done. Country leadership was also hugely important. It was hugely important back at the time of the Baku Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, but also with respect to the Southern Gas Corridor. And Georgia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Albania, Greece, Italy, for the most part, although there were some issues towards the end, also kept kept their eyes on the ball. And sure, there were very difficult negotiations, for example, on transit fees in Turkey, but the leadership, President Aliyev, and all the way up to President Erdogan in Turkey, kept both countries' eyes on the ball, and when there were difficulties, insisted that there be resolution, and there was. Others have mentioned bipartisanship in the U.S. There's been bipartisan support in the U.S. for Caspian resources for 25 years, and that's been hugely important. And also the mention of U.S.-EU cooperation. There was very delicate diplomacy between the U.S. and the EU in connection with the Southern Corridor. It became clear that a big Nabucco pipeline was going to be impossible. And frankly, it took a lot of convincing of a lot of people that was impossible, and that the best solution ultimately was the pipeline system that's in place now, including the TAP pipeline. And I'll add to that, both BP and SOCAR played extremely important roles in recognizing under what conditions a TAP pipeline might be acceptable. An expandable pipeline, gas going into ultimately going into the Balkans. All of that was important to convince the governments involved to fully support what in fact has taken place. Just briefly looking to the future, and I'll mention the agreement that was reached between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan with respect to Dastuk, and I'll refer back to Aline's comments about my life expectancy. I'd often said that there'd be no Trans-Caspian gas pipeline during my lifetime. My problem is I'm getting old, so I'm getting worried about it. But in any event, just for some historical context on that, I was involved in that 22 years ago and 23 years ago. Then Secretary of Energy Bill Richardson was the appointed mediator to resolve the boundary dispute between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan in the middle of the Caspian, which went right through where this project is. It was called, on one side, I forget which, Karpaz, on the other side, Serdar at that point, and now it's Dostuk. We had an agreement in place 22 years ago. President Haidar, I basically ended up doing most of the negotiating with respect to this. And President Haidar Aliyev and I thought Turkmenbashi had agreed to a joint project, which is now Dostuk, and a way to determine the boundaries. And it was all set, but then the next day I went in to see Turkmenbashi, President Niyazov of Turkmenistan, and he said he couldn't do it. And I said, what do you mean you can't do it? He said, I'm afraid of the Russians. He put it in more graphic language. And he basically at that time wouldn't go through with the deal. And so I really did question whether this all would ever be resolved between the two countries, plus Russia's general opposition to any kind of gas going across the Caspian. This might work because it's a project, finally 22 years later, it's a project in the middle of the Caspian. It doesn't involve a pipeline that would go all the way across the Caspian. It could come from the project itself. Maybe it's something that Russia wouldn't squawk too much about and create too much interference. We'll see. I hope it's the case. But as far as the future, very briefly, of the Southern Gas Corridor, I would say that we have to be careful to always recognize that these projects cannot be political. They have to be commercially viable, as is this project that we're celebrating. And given the present situation with respect to gas demand, the effects of the pandemic, the green transition, I think there are real questions even with respect to Dostuk. What companies are going to get involved in the project ultimately? Other new projects in other parts of the region. There are, I think, some real commercial issues at this point. Gas is going to continue to be very important, as Frank pointed out, but there are a lot of factors that are going to have to be considered as to whether some of these projects will in fact need to go forward. I hope they do. And gas will continue to be important. Let me leave it there at this point and jump in later with questions.
Thank you very much, Dick. Thanks for those remarks. If I could turn the floor over now to Elshad Nasirov, who is Vice President at SOCAR for Investments and Marketing, and who we keep referring to constantly as another one of the godfathers of this project. Elshad?
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Chikuta. It's such a big honor to see all of you again, ambassadors. Mr. Fannin, I cannot get used to say former, because nobody in this panel can be considered as a former. Ambassador Morningstar, Ambassador Chikuta, once you have been founder fathers to this project, it will always stay in our life. And I would propose a hope. I would hope that Ambassador Morningstar one day would use his time to write a book about the Southern Gas Corridor, or maybe even more interesting, a script for a Hollywood film. I think that the script could be very interesting with so many actors, with so many countries and capitals involved. And during all of these years since 2010, when the government of Azerbaijan decided to start the production and export of gas to Turkey, Georgia, and Europe, of course, we had so many visits to all of the capitals, not only through the TAP corridor, but to the countries of Nabucco. And of course, one of the most dramatic meetings in Vienna was the meeting with the participants of Nabucco project, where me and Al Cook, Ambassador Morningstar, you remember Al Cook, we had to inform the participants of Nabucco project that they lost the competition of the project to the top project. And that unfortunately happened not in Nabucco or Italian composer's room, but in Ludwig van Beethoven room in Vienna International Hotel. That was another mistake from the Nabucco participants in order to find a proper room for the project. But at the same time, I think that we have to congratulate each one of us with the completion of one of the great energy projects in the world and in the history of the hydrocarbons. We started in 1847 in Baku. We have never tried to do anything like this, and I'm absolutely, I share the view of Mr. Fannin that nobody would believe that this project could be done so many years ago when we were thinking about this endeavor. And if 2020, of course, was one of the least successful years for all countries in the world, and it is a sad situation, but of course for the authors of the project, for the recipients of gas, for the producers of gas, for the transit countries, of course this is a year of success, especially for Azerbaijan, which not only completed the construction from Baku to Italy, but year 2020 will always stay in the history of Azerbaijan as the year of the victory and the for 30 years, we waited for the liberation of the territory of Azerbaijan, and that happened. And that was also quite an unexpected event during the 2020. And the Southern Gas Corridor, of course, I share the view that it is extremely sophisticated, very difficult project. And if you remember, December 2013, the pile of documents which had to be signed on the transportation of gas, on the production of Chardonnays, on transit issue, on sales of gas, and all legal documents, the pile of the documents was 4 meters, 20 centimeters high. And we managed not only to sign all of the documents, but in 7 years, only in 8 years, we managed to construct the pipeline with the efforts and strong support from the United States, from the governments of Georgia, Turkey, Albania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Italy. And we are thankful to all of the governments and all representatives that participated in the completion, in the inauguration, and of course in the construction and the completion of the project. And of course, our thanks from SOCAR goes to BP during this period. And we started the project not with the same composition of partners. And BP proved to be the most stable and the most reliable partner, not only in this project, but in many projects in Azerbaijan and in the Caspian. Despite the complexity and the scope of the project was delivered in time. And as Ambassador Suleimanov already mentioned, with the initial budget of up to $45 billion, we managed altogether to complete the project under $33 billion. Especially, I'm proud to say that in Tanap, where SOCAR was the operator of the construction, we managed to complete the construction with the budget of $12.5 billion. We managed to complete it under $7 billion, thus making the tariff for transportation of the Caspian gas less than expected. Of course, the volumes of the Southern Gas Corridor, the gas that would be delivered to Europe, is not a big amount for Europe's overall gas consumption. But of course, the new route, and most importantly, the new source of gas is the most important aspect of this project. And of course, as ambassador, as Deputy Chief of Mission, Ambassador Ertay said, Turkey's importance, Turkey's influence, Turkey's role in the project is enormous. And of course, the consumption of gas in Turkey is the key aspect of the existence of the Southern Gas Corridor. And of course, the vice versa, the Southern Gas Corridor provided to Turkey an alternative source of gas that proved to be a new and the main gas supplier source for Turkey last year. As far as the prices are concerned, it seemed to us in the end of the last year that LNG was cheaper as twice as the pipeline project was delivering gas to Europe, but now the situation became absolutely different. And now the European countries, recipients of gas, now can see that the pipeline gas is still as important as it was in 2013 when the pipeline and the project were initiated. And of course, the history and the chronology of the construction of the pipeline was very difficult. And during our Atlantic Council discussion back in 2020, we had the opportunity to discuss that the military operations of fighting between the Republic of Armenia and Azerbaijan were not subject of sudden initiation or sudden situation. It was well planned, and the project, the infrastructure, not only the Southern Gas Corridor, but BTC and the highway from Baku to Tbilisi and the railway Baku-Tbilisi-Kars were only 15 kilometers from the border of Armenia where the fighting started. And of course, the importance of the liberation of Azerbaijani territories and restoration of the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan is not only important for our country, but for the region in general, for Georgia, Turkey, Armenia proper. And last but not least, this is very important for the European Union and the countries that would receive gas, because the threat of the military operation or fighting between the two countries were always as the sword of Damocles hanging above the project. And now it seems that the security and safety of the corridor is much more stable and reliable. And of course, the best protection is peace. And we hope that the people of Armenia will also have the benefits of the peace and the restoration of the territorial integrity of their neighbors and the restoration of diplomatic relationship with their neighbors would benefit the people of Armenia. And of course, our citizens of Armenian origin inside Azerbaijan, since Azerbaijan now started very big and very quick projects to restore all of the territories of Nagorno-Karabakh and the 7 adjacent regions. In the next phase of the Southern Gas Corridor, together with our partners in Shah Deniz and other projects, we hope to reach additional markets in the Western Balkans, and we hope to inaugurate the delivery of gas to the citizens of Albania and other Western Balkan countries in order for them to feel the benefit of the new important project crossing the Balkans and leading to Italy. And of course, these countries must receive gas from the Southern Gas Corridor. And of course, we hope and we are looking forward to additional gas volumes from the Eastern Mediterranean, including that from Israel. Israeli gas to Turkey and then entering TANAP swap in the Turkish market is commercially the most viable option to export gas from the East Med into Europe. And with the very high prices of the construction of the gas pipeline across the Mediterranean, the consideration of the connection into the existing pipeline would be very important for the countries in the region. And of course, I would share the importance of the recent signing of a memorandum with Turkmenistan. And I don't have any doubts, Ambassador Morningstar, that in your book, you will write about the construction of an interconnector for the gas pipeline between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, since this memorandum, as it was stressed in Ashgabat during the signing ceremony and after that, that this memorandum and this project is only the first and a small step in the big range of different projects with Turkmenistan and beyond. And I'm happy to say that the Azerbaijani sector of the Caspian Sea is going to produce additional volumes, and I would share this information with you. The drilling in the Shafaga-Siman project, which is a promising project, is coming to its logical completion, and we have only 3 meters left to get the hydrocarbons, hopefully, knock on wood, in Shafaga-Siman. And one of the next steps, which SOCAR together with other partners in other projects we are considering, is the introduction of hydrogen into the pipeline and the production of hydrogen from alternative energy sources in Azerbaijan and in the Caspian. Ambassador Morningstar, Al Cook is coming to Baku in a couple of weeks, so I'm waiting for your messages to Al Cook. Now he is the Senior Vice President responsible for all of Europe and Azerbaijan and upstream in Equinor, in a Norwegian company. And I'm happy to inform you that on February 11, we will have the video Southern Gas Corridor Advisory Council with the participation of President of Azerbaijan and several heads of states, governments, and ministers. So I'm looking forward to see all of the representatives of our beloved partners and companies. Thank you very much, Ambassador Chikuta. It was an honor, a pleasure to see all of you and to share my my excellent feelings about everything that we have achieved together. Without your participation, nothing could have been achieved at all. Thank you.
Yeah, Elshad, please give my warm regards to Al Cook. I should have mentioned him because he was really the BP hero in all of this, and he's still remains a very good friend. He was a major part of the success of the project.
Definitely will deliver that. I think that he will be delighted to get this message. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Elshad. Well, let me turn now to another of the BP heroes, Bob Scher, who is the head of international affairs for BP America in Washington, and comes to this from extensive experience in the Pentagon and elsewhere in the U.S. government. Bob?
Great. Well, thank you. I am hardly a hero of this. When the idea for this 7 years ago or more was brought forth, I was in the position of Frank Fannin, looking to become a former Assistant Secretary of Defense, or former Assistant Secretary. So I really am a representative here of BP and all of the people, Al Cook, many others, Bob Dudley, who have brought to fruition and helped be part of bringing this to fruition. I'm a little hesitant to talk too much. BP has gotten a lot of mentions here, and I don't want anybody to come away with a different view of BP after my talk than they did before. But having said that, having to do this, look, there's been a lot of talk about this throughout the years. There are a lot of speakers that came before. And frankly, for 7 years, we've been talking about this. There's a reason why. But I will say that if we were actually in a room back in the old days, I would look out to everybody in the room and say, who here didn't believe we'd have first gas in 2020 from the Southern Gas Corridor? And I'd make everybody raise their hands or not. And then with those people still there, I'd say, well, okay, who here didn't believe that there would actually ever be gas into Western Europe at all? And I think a number of people's hands would still be up. And I think that's okay, because I think, you probably weren't alone. This is a tremendous project, a complicated project, and to think, an audacious project. And to think that it would be completed on time and under budget is fairly remarkable. And so when I think back to this, and I think we've heard a lot of people here speaking about this, I come away with 5 reasons why this was successful. And I think you've heard some of these from everybody, and everyone sort of touched on it, which makes me feel comfortable about pushing forward on this. The first one was, look, there's a real business case here and a clear imperative. If there wasn't a business case, no private company, BP or any other, would be involved in it. There's a reason why this had the emphasis that it did. It's because we saw that there was a business case, there was an imperative for this. We wanted to diversify the supply of energy, and there was a need for energy and natural gas into Western Europe and on that route as well. So need to have that clear imperative. Secondly, a really close coordination between the private sector and the public sectors. We've heard a lot about this, but I think it bears repeating. Governments throughout the pathway and other governments that weren't directly involved, the United States, the EU, there's a lot of cooperation and the coordination and an understanding of what was at stake and what needed to get done. And that was a huge piece. Third, I think a top-notch technical expertise, right? This is not just a political project. This is not just, this has real technical pieces to it. And it's an engineering marvel as well as a political marvel. And we've heard all the statistics, but 3,500 kilometers of pipe, 7 countries, 11 purchasers, 11 companies, 16 BCM of gas into markets into Europe. This is not just a political issue. This is a technical issue. You need to have top-notch technical and engineering expertise to be able to do something like this. Fourth, I think it's a real clear commitment and clear goals. Throughout this time frame, any one of the actors could have lost focus, and no one did. And as long as you have everybody understanding what the clear goals are, what's to be achieved, you get through everything from olive trees in Italy through to farmers in Greece and through all the technical pieces. And we could all have our favorite story about what that one event was that we were sure was going to delay things even more, going to cost even more, even bring the whole project into question. But because of the commitment of everyone and the clear goals, we succeeded. And fifth, and arguably, well, they're all important, but partnership. The partnerships in the consortium, we've talked about SOCAR, and I think BP, SOCAR, and the other members of the consortium that have changed over the years, but certainly between BP and SOCAR, as Elshad noted, there was always that cooperation, that commitment to each other, and that partnership amongst the countries, amongst the EU. Without that clear indication and a clear commitment to a partnership, I can't imagine this having gotten done. And as a result, we've seen $45 billion of investment into the region, 30,000 jobs, a totally new pathway of supply of energy to growing economies. We've seen a reducing of dependence within Europe on single suppliers for many nations and for many nations along the route. We've seen this linking, a tangible linking between Europe and into Asia and the gateway into Asia. And we came in under budget. So there are so many people to thank, so many people here on this call, so many people who couldn't be here on this call. And I also want to thank the Caspian Policy Center for always keeping a clear eye on this and making sure that they know that there's a focus on it, and they know we know that there's a focus on it. So I have to say, as you look into the future, it's hard to see a project of this size, scope, difficulty getting done these days. I think it was hard to see that it getting done back 7 years ago when we got to final investment decision. But if anyone wants to tackle this large a technological, engineering, and political feat, I really think to keep in mind are the things that made this one successful. Again, a business case, the private-public sector cooperation, technical expertise, clear goals and mission, and a tremendous partnership. And I will leave it there and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you. And appreciate everybody's comments and remarks. One of the things that we usually have at this point in one of these events is the moderator's prerogative to ask questions. However, we've got quite a backlog of questions on this, which is a good sign for how great your presentations all were. What I'd like to try to do is try to maybe combine a few of them together. And let me start first. A number of you have talked about where do we go next in terms of going east, in terms of, say, Turkmenistan, the signing of the agreement with Dostluk, joking about poor Richard's life expectancy with the pipeline. And Dick, we don't believe you. You will be there for whenever it is that sort of happens, or you won't get out of this any sooner than the rest of us do. But I seriously would like to sort of, get a sense from Frank and the panelists and any of the ambassadors who want to comment on this. How do you engage to sort of move that gas east, particularly at this moment, given the reductions in capital expenditures by the energy companies, given the dynamics in the discussion about a future of gas? So if I could just sort of turn that over and kind of do that in jump ball and see who might want to respond. Or do I call on people? Bob's shaking his head no, that he wants to get with us.
No, I'm happy to do it, but Dick, I think, is trying to talk and it's not working.
Oh, right. I was on mute again. Nobody was jumping in, so I thought I would. I think first of all, I think the really good news part of it is that the real cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan to finally resolve this issue in the middle of the Caspian that had been sitting there for, I think Aline mentioned 30 years, and I certainly was involved more than 20 years ago. And so it's certainly good that happened. But I think the real answer as to what the ultimate viability is, and maybe somebody else can be more direct, I don't know. There are still some real questions involved. Who's going to be involved in the project? Is it just going to be SOCAR and the Turkmen company? Are there going to be other partners? Are other partners going to see this as a commercially viable project, given issues that have already been mentioned as to capital expenditures, gas demand, the energy transition, and so on? And what's the Russian reaction going to be? And because they've played such a huge role in influencing events in the Caspian, at least as far as anything relating to cross-Caspian. I hope it all works out, I really do. And I do intend to be around if in fact it does. But I think there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong or disagree, I don't think there's any way to really know at this point.
Yeah, Bob, I'll just say that, BP has been very clear about the fact that we are committed to becoming a net zero company by 2050 or sooner. But part of that net zero is still going to be in, and as we get to that point, is still going to be in hydrocarbons to some extent. We will have to figure out how to decarbonize hydrocarbons. And obviously we as a company are going to be investing a lot in clean and renewable sources and other sources. But I think as you look out into the reasonable and realistic path of decarbonization, there will still be a need for low carbon and lower carbon fuels. And natural gas, if done responsibly and dealing with leakage and other pieces, can be a part of that mix. And I think, frankly, is going to have to be a part of that mix as you go forward. I don't think anyone's willing to predict for how long, but certainly for a period of time, we believe there will be markets, and that's going to be part of the decarbonization process. So we still feel comfortable with some sources of hydrocarbons, if we can look to decarbonize them moving forward, that there is still a market there.
Yeah, I'd just like to underscore the point I made some similar comments before about how how gas can be an enabler toward energy transition, be consistent in addressing things like Bob mentioned, leakage. Again, dealing with some of the most sophisticated, technologically innovative companies in the world, they can address those issues. The other point that, and Dick made a reference to the Russians. I mean, there is an ongoing lobbying campaign in Brussels to assess the relative carbon content of gas. We've seen Nord Stream Group's environmental impact assessment that they produced on themselves, and measured their gas relative to other forms of gas, of export gas, U.S., Australian, Qatari gas, for example. And of course, according to Gazprom, they had quite a glowing carbon footprint relative to these other sources. So by contrast, a civil society organization, environmental NGO called the Carbon Disclosure Project, now it's called the CDP, I think, based out of London, does I think, biannual assessment of the largest climate polluters. And a few years ago, they concluded that Gazprom was the third worst in the world. Now, I can't speak to the methodology that Carbon Disclosure Project assesses its greenhouse gas emissions testing, but I have probably a greater degree of confidence in their transparency than Gazprom's. So I would encourage, what the extent to which there will be an investable proposition to these projects is wholly dependent on, is there a customer to buy it? And if Brussels determines, if your main customers are in the process right now of coming up with things like a taxonomy to measure greenhouse gas content, I would encourage free-thinking suppliers to engage and to walk through and be very, very transparent about how this gas is produced and the methodology and the relative leakage and all of these issues, and ask for that methodology to be enshrined and compare that and have an honest, transparent conversation in Brussels about it. Because that's not how others are operating.
I don't want to have sounded like a stick in the mud, because I do think that gas, I agree with both Bob and Frank, that gas is going to continue to be tremendously important, and decarbonized gas is going to be critical for gas to continue to play a major role. I still think there are going to be major commercial issues with respect to new projects in the region that are going to have to be dealt with.
Can I just change a little bit, because we are running very short on time, but another set of questions have to do with supply of gas to the Balkans. My own experience and others, Frank, you talked about this, the Albanian ambassador talked about this. Mr. Ertay from the Turkish embassy talked about Istanbul as a hub. We have a question here about some discussion about Greece as a hub. Elshad talked about inshallah, the prospects for increased supplies out of Azerbaijan and elsewhere in the region. How do we get gas to the Balkans now, particularly at a time when Brussels is very strongly talking about renewables and seems to have a lot of misgivings about even supporting the production or the distribution of any hydrocarbon? Maybe it's an exaggeration, but I think, if you're sitting in Skopje or you're sitting in Pristina or other countries in that region, you see that need for energy. How is that going to be delivered? And can we expand the Southern Gas Corridor to meet that need? Maybe I can pick on Elshad for that one.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chikuta, thank you. We will be having a dialogue between Azerbaijan and the European Commission on the 2nd of February. There will be several institutions involved from Azerbaijan. It will be Minister of Energy, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course SOCAR. And we will discuss the conditions and situation when the delivery of gas, additional gas to the Western Balkans can happen. And of course, for the producers of gas in the Caspian and elsewhere, it's very important to know whether the financing for these new projects and the expansion of the new pipelines will not be limited to the green energy only. And you know about the decisions of the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, who decided to support only projects with green energy. So in this case, of course, we have to find out what are the decisions of the governments of the Western Balkan countries. At the end of the production of gas, before sanctioning or before triggering any production of additional gas, we have to know whether these countries and companies will buy this additional gas and for how many years. And of course, one of the most important issues is who, on behalf of the Western Balkan countries, will be partnering with the producers of gas in the Caspian and elsewhere. Which companies will be that involved in this process? So we hope to receive answers to many of questions like this during our dialogue with the European Commission on the 2nd of February. And as far as Turkmenistan is concerned, Richard, you mentioned that there are so many questions about the development of the project between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. Of course, the document that was signed is only a memorandum. But if you look at the timing of the signing of the first document between the two countries of this great significance, this is not a coincidence. Everybody knows about the trilateral talks in Brussels between Turkmenistan, European Commission, and Azerbaijan. And of course, everybody in Brussels and the United States were expecting the commitments to be taken by the government of Turkmenistan on the supply of Turkmenistani gas to the European Union. And for all of these years, nobody received any commitment. So it seems now that the timing of the beginning of the process is quite logical. It was very strange to get the commitment from a country which doesn't have access to the infrastructure to Turkey and Europe. And of course, we can understand the government of Turkmenistan that they were waiting until the infrastructure connecting the Caspian Sea and Europe and Turkey sorry, is ready. So therefore, there is no coincidence that the first flow of gas to Europe started on the 31st of December, and the first document to be signed was in 3 weeks, in less than 3 weeks after that. And of course, there are objective factors behind that. You know that Turkmenistan is producing about 61 billion cubic meters of gas, and the bulk of it, 31 billion cubic meters or so, is directed to China. Iran and Russia are not buying Turkmenistani gas, so the Turkmenistan needs additional transportation route. And we're happy to introduce this new transportation route to our Turkmenistani colleagues. So we are looking forward to have a successful round of negotiations. In accordance with the memorandum, there will be a working group between the two countries, consistent and headed by the ministers of foreign affairs. And we are waiting for the list of the institutions to be included from Turkmenistan. So we're ready to go ahead.
Thanks, Alshad. Frank, can I just ask, since you work so much on this, maybe sort of a final comment on this? We're running out of time, but I would like to bring you in on that.
What part specifically, Bob?
Well, I think, again, this question, the supply to the Balkans and how we can help that happen, particularly as Alshad noted, we've got, I mean, one of the things which I did, when I was ambassador, working with your predecessor very hard to sort of make sure we could get the financing out of the IFEs and so on. How do you sort of see that sort of shaking out?
Yeah, it's a complex situation if there isn't a realization of improvement versus perfect. And again, certain countries are transitioning at different stages. If a country is 70% coal dependent, is moving that off and going to gas an improvement? I would argue it is. If their incumbent supplier, either in the current gas supplier options or nuclear fuel are the Russians, and these countries don't want to continue to have that, back to my comment earlier, where energy project can be a leash or a tether holding them back. If they don't want to do that, and they want to look more Western rather than Eastern, can they, is there an openness in Brussels to support that kind of a project? What I see as a potential is this creation of a regional energy markets. I know there's been talk about hubs and who's the hub. Everyone wants to be a hub, by the way, the world over. But what I think is an exciting development is the creation of this regionalization of an energy market, and we're seeing that happen in multiple places around the world, where you have real committed capital. Does everyone necessarily need to have a pipeline built? Maybe not. It's a lot easier to build transmission lines. Because of COVID, I had to end up doing most of the driving around the Balkans rather than, because my flights kept getting canceled. It's rough terrain. It's technically challenging, and it's hard to build big infrastructure through these multiple countries. So would it be easier to perhaps wheel power from one country to another via transmission lines? Again, with the Southern Gas Corridor proof of concept, I think we have a new lens through which to look at things in a more creative way. I do think that there needs to be this recognition of these two non-commercial influences that can affect partner choice and deal selection. And those are issues with respect to great power competition with the US, EU, and Russia, as well as China, given China's prevalence to increase their expenditure in Europe. The EU-China trade relationship I think should give, is another element we haven't talked about in this conversation, but I think it's relevant here, particularly in the context of renewables and clean energy technologies, and the integration of new the software and other 5G telecom related means to optimize grid optionality or grid optimization. I mean, we need to be open and considerate of that, because we're potentially creating new security threats. So that's one in terms of where do you find the financing? And I would encourage Brussels and all of us, including the IFEs, to be more open to the recognition that not all countries are starting in the same place in terms of transition. Countries, for their own security, may not want to have to go backward in time and rely on Russia, either for nuclear power or for gas. And also to be wary of other financing that could come with considerable strings attached from the Chinese. I think we've done a remarkable work, the Southern Gas Corridor, and we're seeing this halo effect. I went to see and was in Sofia, and I saw the IGB being laid. This is a big project, $6 billion, I think, project. I was in Skopje. These things are happening. This isn't notional, but we need to create the momentum. And by creating the investment case, maybe we reduce the need for EBRD and other funding. So those are just some quick thoughts. I think all of these countries should be engaged in Brussels, and I'm pleased to hear that our Azerbaijani colleagues are going to be doing just that. But I think this speaks to an issue of sovereignty for these countries. It speaks to security and really the freedom of countries to chart their own path. And I know a lot of these countries in the Balkans are either new or aspiring to be EU members. That's a good thing. The EU should embrace them and welcome this on this path. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And I think we're now running out of our time, so I will turn the floor over to Efkan in a minute, but I want to thank all the participants today. I think the one point that came across to me very much is we finished a chapter, but we have not finished the book. That there is a new chapter that's started to be written, and I think many of the people on this program will have a role in that, inshallah. Efkan?
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for good, excellent moderation. I'd like to thank all our speakers here, Ambassador of Azerbaijan, Ambassador of Albania, Georgia, and Turkish Embassy as well, and also SOCAR, BP, Elshad Malim, Bob, and also Dick Morningstar, Ambassador Morningstar from Atlantic Council, to joining us today. One issue that I again want to highlight here is that building on what Frank Fannin said on the halo effect, it's good to see this completion of the Southern Gas Corridor. And I think it's indeed a momentum for other projects in the region and across Eastern Europe as well. I think this is a good example, good proof case for a lot of other projects in the area. And I also want to highlight the importance of the Turkmenistan-Azerbaijan agreement. It was mentioned, and I think this is an important milestone after the Southern Gas Corridor. As it was mentioned, Turkmenistan was looking forward to see the completion of the infrastructure, taking gas from the Caspian all the way to Europe. Here I also want to mention that at the Caspian Policy Center, we started the year with the energy event, but we'll continue the tradition of holding multiple events on the Caspian region. We have upcoming 5th Trans-Caspian Forum in March, 16th and 17th of March. A lot of issues of the Caspian will be on the agenda, including the connectivity, obviously energy connectivity, digital connectivity, and other transport and transit issues in the region. We saw huge support from the embassies that have been working with us on this project. I'd like to thank all of them on that. Also, I want to highlight that today's event attracted a lot of attention, and I'm happy to see that. I'd like to thank our CPC team for making efforts to put together the event and also promotion of the event as well. Once again, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning into our event. We look forward to seeing you in our future events and have a great rest of the day and have a great 2021.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.